So firstly, thanks very much for making yourselves available for this session. Hopefully you find it interesting. We've got a couple of speakers lined up for you today to share some of the work that we as the IAB have been doing in the space of understanding the programmatic marketplace. And we're hoping to have some time during the session to ask questions, to answer questions, to have a bit of a discussion about what this means for the industry and how we collectively can work together as an industry to help grow and improve this part of our industry. So today, I'll just give a short introduction to the project, what we were doing, why we did it, how we did it, etc. Then I'll ask Jocelyn from Havas to talk us through the insights that we obtained regarding spends, or the way that spends are allocated in this region. Jocelyn will spend a bit of time talking through this, but basically this is not to say that we've gone and done an actual spend exercise. This is the perception of how people are allocating the investments. The ad spend survey that the IAB does will be released probably around June, we think, which will have more specific ad spend estimates around both programmatic and other aspects of the industry. But we've obviously double-checked the results that we got from the perspectives of this survey with the initial work that we're doing on the ad spend survey to ensure that everything is aligned and there's going to be no surprises when the ad spend survey comes out. So a number of interesting insights that Jocelyn will talk us through there. Why Jocelyn, or why Julian, or why Ashra for that matter? They were leading a team of people that I'll talk about in a moment that has collated the information that we as an industry believe we needed to understand around programmatic investments, around operational setup and the decisions for how operational setup is made. And then finally, around drivers and barriers, what we think are the key aspects of programmatic that are helping the industry grow, and what are the areas that we believe are actually slowing the industry down. Then, we'll have a session at the end, talk a little bit about what we as IAB are doing as next steps, but really this is an opportunity for everyone on this call to talk about your perspectives of what you've seen today, and how we collectively can think about what we need to do as an industry to not only grow this part of the business, but actually put it in a way that's sustainable, more trustworthy, and is actually helping our people grow as individuals and as companies as well. So that's kind of the session for today. I just want to take a moment to thank the companies that resources were allocated to this project to help us develop it. So I'm not going to go through all of the names here, but these are people from these companies were involved in designing the questionnaire that we used. The questionnaire was distributed to a much wider range than just these companies, but certainly these companies were involved in actually sifting through what is the information that we believe we need as an industry, what are the questions we need to ask, and how we go about asking those questions. So many thanks to these companies who have really engaged in this project. A little bit about the backgrounds. So why did we do this in the first place? So the initial background was after the ad spend survey we concluded last year. One of the areas that came back was that programmatic as a proportion of the total display investment seemed low relative to the perspectives that we had in the market. I think it was somewhere around between 20 and 30% of display spend, and display we mean non-social, non-search, was deemed to be programmatic. And the more we looked at this, the more we felt that actually this was less to do with that was the accurate number, and more to do with the way that people were defining programmatic, the understanding of what programmatic actually means, what's included and what's not included. And so this is where we sort of got together as an industry. We got together as those 15 companies that I shared earlier to talk around, is there a consistency in the way that we think about defining programmatic, and do we as an industry understand what is driving it and what's not driving it? So that's really what this is all about. This is about understanding how those within the industry see the industry, and how those within the industry are making decisions that affect the industry. So this is very much aimed at people within the programmatic industry and their perspectives of it. We didn't ask people to share specific information around, for example, how much their company spent on specific areas. It was more around what they thought they were doing. So it's insights rather than the facts, if that makes any sense. So 20 experts, I've just talked about this, 20 experts from those 15 companies designed a questionnaire. It was 35 questions if you're interested, and we distributed this across MENA using, obviously the IAB's contacts, but actually all the contacts from those companies and others as well. Fieldwork was conducted over February and March, so a pretty long fieldwork period to ensure that we had the full opportunity for people in the industry to take part in the survey and contribute. Just before we go on, I think it's important to take a note to come back on some of the definitions that I was discussing earlier. And the way that we defined it for the purposes of this exercise was programmatic as an automated process for buying or selling advertising inventory. Now, we looked at what IABs are doing in other markets. We spoke to IAB Europe, for example, to try and get a consistency of definition. And what's very interesting is there actually isn't a consistency of definition in many markets around the world. So we've created our own consistent definition for this study and for future studies that we do going forward. So just to be 100% clear, what does this include and exclude? Again, I'm not going to read all the charts to you, but certainly what this basically means is things like DSPs or Amazon, Google, anything where you can purchase more than one SSP is considered in scope within this. Whereas, if it's an ad manager that only buys within a walled garden, for example, or a good example would be Teads, then we have excluded that from the definition of programmatic. Just so we're clear around programmatic direct, this is considered anything that's private marketplace, preferred deals, or guaranteed deals. We defined all other programmatic as open exchange. So hopefully that gives you some sort of context for when we go through some of the numbers to make sure that you're sure that you're defining things the same way we are, so that we all have joint definitions. We didn't quote the survey specifically, but we did skew it towards the buy side. So you'll see that there's a huge proportion of people that work within agencies. So just to be clear, this is not 47% of agencies, or it's not that the agencies represent 47%. This is the number of respondents. So of all the respondents, 47% worked in an agency. So that means we would have multiple respondents from agencies, for example. The total number of respondents for the whole survey, by the way, was 125 verified respondents, so people who actually completed the survey or enough questions to be considered within the survey. We actually had more people start the survey or answer one or two questions, but we didn't include those respondents. Only respondents that answered a number of questions that we included within the survey to keep it balanced. But you will see that the N number, the number of respondents per question, does vary. We talked about how many were working for different agencies or publishers, etc. What did they do within those organizations? A large portion were either selling inventory or ad tech solutions. Many people were influencing the decisions that were made either within their agency or within their company, and we had a fair chunk of people that were actually involved in the hands-on operating of, for example, a DSP or a measurement technology. Looking at who these people are and how their company operated, the vast majority believed that their decisions were local, and we thought that that's important to share. So these are people who felt that they actually had an influence in the way that the operation worked and the decisions that they were making. And it's skewed towards large advertisers. So people or companies that were spending more than $1 million per annum on programmatic advertising. So that gives you a flavor of what this data represents. I'm now going to hand over to Jocelyn, who will share the spends insights that the spends team have collated, and he's the spokesperson on behalf of the spends task force on programmatic. Jocelyn.
Thank you very much, Ian. Hi, everyone. All right, so let's start with the first slide on the programmatic over direct hires. Thank you, Ian. So let's all remember that basically this is a perception of the market, not a measure of the market, as Ian mentioned earlier. Another study will be coming out in June, which will be more complete. with, for example, the numbers of programmatic versus social search, etc. Okay, so what we're looking at here in this slide is the measure of programmatic as in open exchange versus programmatic direct versus direct. Okay, direct being everything that is not bought programmatically. All right, so as you can see here, we're looking at 80% of display investments that are invested programmatically. All right, so that's your open exchange and your programmatic direct. Still leaving a quarter of the investment for direct IO, but it's still quite a consequent amount going to programmatic. Now it's really interesting to put this in perspective and look at these numbers versus the numbers that we had last year for programmatic. Last year we were looking at 20–30%. So it means that, again, this is the perception. Either we're doing a really good job at programmatic, and there's probably also a mix of basically the perception of programmatic that has evolved and being a lot more present in the market. Okay. Now, seeing as open exchange here, you can see it's definitely taking the bigger part of everything. So let's try and break it down and see exactly what it's made of. Thank you, Ian. So we've got two sides to this graph. If you look on the left, you've got the performance side. If you look on the right, you've got the branding side. What we're trying to show here is basically, if you look at performance, you're looking at 75% of it being transacted on open exchange, okay, versus only 50% for branding. The rest of the branding, as in that 50%, would be PMPs, private marketplaces, PG deals, etc., etc. Now we also need to remember that within that branding, you would also have YouTube, which of course is inflating that 50%. But if we come back to the 75% on performance, very clearly, when you talk about performance, it's pretty much going to be all open exchange, right? Which kind of makes sense because you need more inventory to have better CTR, CPO, CPMs, etc., etc. Okay. Now we've looked at open exchange. Let's have a look at PGs and private deals. So next slide, please. Thank you very much. So here, what we learned from this slide is that basically 70% of the people that we have asked the question to see the value in PG, so programmatic guaranteed, and PD, private deals. Okay, so much more value or slightly more value. What this means is that if you're not doing a performance campaign, if you're doing a brand campaign, it does make sense to attribute more value to PGs or PDs for the simple reason that they have a lot of advantages. So I'm thinking about a defined site list, guaranteed inventory, ease of use, fixed CPMs, etc., etc. The list goes on. So for brand campaigns, it does actually make sense. Okay. Now we want to go even more granular in the breakdown, and let's have a look at this between PG and private deals. Okay. So PG and PD account for 80%. So that's the vast majority of programmatic direct investments. Okay. Again, explained by the site list, the guaranteed inventory, the ease of use, etc. So this makes a lot of sense, right? Because the private marketplace here would be least utilized with only 20%, meaning the users, and do remember that when we were looking at the numbers earlier, so this whole study, the respondents, 47% of them are agency respondents, right? So the agencies will have a bigger weight, basically a bigger skew in all the answers, but for the agencies, it would make sense that PD and PG are more important since they give you more control than a simple PMP, than a simple private marketplace. Okay. Now we've broken down open exchange, we've broken down PG versus PMP versus PD. Let's have a look at the future of programmatic and where the industry thinks that it's going to. Okay. So these results here are 2020 versus 2023. Okay, so we've skipped 2022 in order to have next year as a vision. All right, as you can see, display and YouTube are actually not growing. They're not regressing that much, but they're not really going anywhere. When video so not YouTube. Video is growing, but marginally, probably because it's already quite big. And the biggest, fastest growing channel is going to be DOH and audio, completely on the right of your screen, okay? This makes a lot of sense. It's growing extremely rapidly, also because it's the smallest for the moment, okay? Sponsored content is growing very marginally as well, and video CTV is also growing, but not in the same proportions, okay? So another format that has boomed recently as well is shoppable ads. So we wanted to ask people about this. So you know that basically during COVID, I think quite a few brand campaigns took a hit because the budgets were massively reduced. And what happened, and there was a massive influx of pure performance campaigns. Okay, so of course, Programmatic saw this coming in as well. And then we can see that the respondents, over 70%, have experience with shoppable ads, which is fantastic. And 30% of these will increase its usage. Okay, so it's definitely something that we want to count in for the coming few years, as these formats will be growing. So direct response with a straight shopping format. Okay, so as an overall takeout for the last few slides, while the perception of programmatic weights within programmatic players might be a little bit off for the moment, it's been growing steadily. We went from 20 to 70, 60%, which is fantastic. It seems there's a consensus on a few other things. So open exchange for performance and PD-PG deals for brand. Everyone agrees on this pretty much. PD-PG have a highly valuable and very utilized for brand campaigns, just because of the advantages that they represent. And DOH and audio's future looks great. It can only grow from now, so it's still pretty small, but it can only grow. Okay. So I'll now leave the floor to Julien, the TEED's MEA Deputy MD, to present the operational setups insights. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. You can hear me well? Yeah. Okay, so we'll cover now the second part of the study, catering with operational setup in the MENA programmatic marketplace. We're rather an intimate sized community today, so feel free to signal me if you're unhappy with the pacing, and we'll adapt. So we've been starting with interrogating agencies on their operating model and how does it split by spends. In conclusion, about half of agencies use in-house operation, while nearly a quarter are outsourcing to either a programmatic specialist or technology company, and about the same portion are outsourcing to a DSP on a managed service basis. Interestingly, on the as you can see on the right-hand side graph, from a spending perspective, the bulk of spend is transiting through in-house trading desk, while outsourcing, on the other hand, seem to be reserved for the long tail of smaller volumes. Right? Now, we've also been looking at factors motivating the decision. As you can observe on the graph on the left, majority are seeking for expertise, knowledge, and transparency quality to select their operating model and manage their programmatic buying. While on the other hand, access to resource and headquarter mandate is given poor importance, which somehow could lead us to assume that our region is showing high level of independence when it comes to motivation decision making at operational level. Also worth highlighting one thing at this point, the high number of respondents on this question, which is giving us great confidence in the representativity of the results. We have also asked the MENA programmatic community, what did they think? Again, referring to a point made by Jocelyn, it's not what they invest themselves or where they invest themselves, but what they think DSP share of total programmatic investment in market was today. With no surprise, DV360 keeps a strong leadership with above 70% of market share. While Trade Desk emerged as a direct challenger and followed by Amazon. Worth also mentioning that we only included here the DSPs that are not bound to a specific SSP. This point was made by Ian in introduction as part of the earlier definition of the study. The trio is also said to keep its leadership, as we can observe on the right, gathering most intention of growth over the next 2 years, where we asked people what do they think would be the winner heading towards 2023. Noting as well that Amazon is leading the growth intention dynamic, certainly driven by brands' appetite for e-commerce, influenced also by the consequence of the pandemic, as mentioned by Jocelyn earlier. With no usage intention and no growth intention overall, other DSPs seem condemned to marginal roles in our region. Another critical topic for the programmatic marketplace is data usage. We have asked the community, in their opinion, what percentage of the MENA programmatic market investments or revenue, on the other hand, for publisher, was reliant on each data types in 2021, and what it will be again in 2023, in their opinion. In summary, we're seeing a notable decline in third-party data usage, certainly related to the context of privacy rise with all actors, deprioritizing third-party over first-party brand-owned and second-party data via trustworthy partner publisher and platforms. Data again in the next question. Here, we've been asking directly how important were each data types in the respondent programmatic buying or selling strategy of 2021, and how important it would be for the same data types in 2023. I'll give you a few seconds to look at the graph. The least we can say is that the results are showing ambiguity. Privacy measures leads to a lack of clarity. That's the takes we make at the IAB on which data data type will be important post-industry transformation. Meanwhile, commerce, insight, and contextual data could offer sustainable solution forward and therefore seem least impacted by the current transformation. Noticing as well an overall data decline, which is once again questioning the strategy, sustainability, and the regional availability also for some data points. We can take the example of the telecom data, for instance, which is on the rise in some other markets, but seeing the poor traction that this data is getting in our market, we can question, of course, the availability in market of these data types. We're now looking at data source on both with both contextual targeting and actionable first-party data, topping up the chart by 80% of data importance for the 2021 marketing and buying strategies. This completes the operational setup part, and allow me to introduce Ashraf, a consultant at Amazon, who will cover the barrier and drivers of programmatic in MENA markets.
Thank you so much, Julien. So hi, everyone. In this last section, we're going to look into the different drivers and barriers that are influencing the decision to invest into programmatic. So let's start off with the different drivers. So here what we did is that we asked the respondents for the relative impact of each one of those drivers and how it's influencing their decision to invest into programmatic. So there are a few things that are really interesting here. If you look at the red line, you can see that the drivers that have the most impact, that are extremely impactful, are mainly the fact that it can drive a better performance, also the targeting efficiencies and the quality of inventory. So these are the main criteria that are positively impacting the decision to invest into programmatic. We can also see that there is the programmatic knowledge in the market that is extremely impactful. So this is as well a reason to spend more into programmatic. Now, if we look on the other side at the barriers that are, preventing spend on programmatic, it gets really interesting, because here we can see two different things. So what you see here on the left side is mainly about talent. So you can see with the red line again that hiring people with the right skill set and programmatic knowledge in the market are the main barriers as to why not investing into programmatic. So this is a big challenge, for the respondents. And there's also anything that is related to more on the operations side of programmatic, such as performance and price efficiency, brand safety, suitability, verification, as well as fraud risk. So we have two key insights here on why not to invest into programmatic and what are the different barriers. One, the talents and the ability to execute those programmatic campaigns. And then secondly, the management of those campaigns and how to set them up properly. So anything related to the performance, the brand safety, the fraud, etc. So what this is telling us is interesting because the second slide about the barriers is kind of contradicting the first slide about the drivers. So we can conclude that there are two different perceptions depending on the experience of the respondents about programmatic. So they can either have a very positive experience with programmatic, working with a team that is very knowledgeable and also having very good results. In that case, their perception of programmatic will be very positive and they will look at all of those criteria as main drivers. If that's not the case, then they will be looking at those different aspects as barriers. So the key insights that we just finishing here, the key insights that we want to draw is when it comes to barriers to growth, here we can really address those by increasing the understanding of programmatic in the market. Because if we were to think about it, the performance of the programmatic campaign or the settings and the brand safety around programmatic campaign is not so much about programmatic, but more about the way it is being set up and the strategy behind it. Programmatic is a tool. You can either set it up in a very safe way with very strict brand safety settings, with a very strict inclusion list, and also focusing on, very on criteria that will drive performance. In that case, it is a positive experience on programmatic, or you can do it in a much less controlled way, which can represent a risk. So this perception of, performance and brand safety is not so much about programmatic, but more about how it is being used by the strategist. The second point is about supporting the right skill set. Jan, if you can just go back again. And the development of knowledge to help overcome the performance and efficiency challenges in the market. And also the last point is about explaining that fraud risk and brand safety can be tackled in numerous ways within the programmatic scope, since there are so many tools that you have available, especially here in MENA, to address those challenges about fraud and brand safety and try to mitigate this as a barrier. Moving on to the next slide. What we wanted to do here is to try to understand on how to move forward from there. So what are the main topics that will help improve the MENA programmatic market? So the main topic is about sales attribution and customer touchpoint. Surprisingly, it is not brand safety or fraud and verification. It's really about sales attribution, which we know is a very critical topic for the upcoming years. And that's not unique to programmatic. It's a topic that comes up a lot across different channels. So that's interesting, and IAB is also doing some work here to get us some information around the specific topic. Then we also wanted to understand the potential of other formats within the programmatic scope, and we asked the respondents to rank the newer formats that would be coming into this region. So the top formats are CTV, digital out of home, as well as audio. Those are the ones that have the strongest potential growth in programmatic. So this concludes the last section about drivers and barriers. I will give it back to Jan, who will take you towards the discussions and the next steps.
Thanks, Ashraf. So I think hopefully you found that interesting. We'll have a little chat about it in a second, but just to give you a sense of where we're going next. So the first thing is that all these insights are going to be filtered into the ad spend survey that's currently in market as we speak, as I mentioned earlier on in the call. So we're ensuring that any of the insights that we've collected from the programmatic community are well reflected within that study. As a few of the speakers alluded to, what we found last year was because we were asking, MDs, trading directors, commercial directors, etc., we found that programmatic was underrepresented in terms of its proportion of the total impact on the market. So we're making sure that this community is well reflected within the wider piece as well. And I think that's generally the perspective that we have from this. The learning that we've got out of this entire exercise is the need for programmatic to step outside of the silo and actually be, a key part of the industry. As Ashraf said, programmatic is simply one of the ways of purchasing media. It's not a channel in its own right. So it's something that I think is going to be more prevalent over time. And it's good that a wider perspective of people understand how it works and the opportunities that it has. And many of those barriers that we looked at can certainly be addressed in many of the text that is available. The second thing that we're doing, one of the other committees, the Research and Measurement Committee within the IAB has also identified, is attribution is a key area for growth for this industry as well. So this community has talked about attribution and sales channels, a measurement as a key opportunity, as have other groups as well. So this is something that definitely the measurement subcommittee will be working on going forward as well. So I think that concludes the session in terms of this particular study. It's the first one of this nature that we've done. As we've made very clear, it's an insight study into the perspectives of people within the industry rather than facts of the industry per se. But like I said, we are verifying that it's pretty close to what the facts suggest, where those are available anyway. So I think at this stage it'd be really interesting to hear people's perspectives. That's the purpose. If you have any questions, any thoughts, it would be wonderful to hear from you at this point in the session. I guess many of you would have actually completed the survey. So now that you've seen the results, is it in line with what you expected to see? Anything that's jumping out as surprising to you?
Speak up, Arpit. Not everybody is seeing the comment button down.
I thought, well, yeah, no, I was just replying to Ian, like the results are very much in line with what my expectation was. So yeah, I think the insights and the facts basically that we get out of the results pretty much tell us where our market stands.
Are there, while we've got you, Arpit, sorry to put you on the spot, but are there other
That's
areas
fine.
you think would be equally useful and interesting that were not covered?
Yes, there could be few things on those lines. One of those things we were discussing on chat. If anyone has not seen the chat yet, do so. The discussion was about YouTube specifically, that I believe has another growth aspect on the performance front. We have all seen YouTube getting majority of the spends from branding activities, but then with the change in optimization objectives on the platform and with the change in the formats that they are coming up with, like Google, and considering the fact that they are least impacted by the cookie deprecation because YouTube uses the logged in data, the user logged in data, I believe there is a shift that we might see from performance. And I'm saying this because YouTube is one of the programmatic considered platform that lies between social and programmatic. It is actually a user-generated platform, behaves like social, but then part of Google ecosystem in DV360 traded programmatically. So that's one thing I would like everyone to focus their attention on. This will take some spends, and then the new in the emerging formats that we talked about, direct digital out of home, CTV, is something that I would say we should focus, continue focusing on. I know we are as a market focusing on these things, so we should continue focusing on, because that's one thing that I predict or expect to happen once we lose the third-party cookie. I believe we can expect a paradigm shift when a lot of brands might move their dollars towards branding, because performance activities will definitely take a hit attribution was one of the things that we saw came up in the study, and I saw on your slide as well, Leanne, that there is going to be some discussions about attribution and like more insights to come. I have my eyes on that because I would be looking forward to see how all the platforms would value attribution once we lose the third-party cookies as well, because I know that attribution is going to take some hit there as well. For example, Facebook coming up with CAPI, which is their like conversion API, something of this sort, maybe like, you know, on the verge. So yeah, thank you for conducting this study. I believe first of its kind gives us real insights on the market.
Great, thanks for your perspectives, Alpert. I also noticed there's a couple of people from companies that specialize in helping with brand safety, brand suitability, etc. on the call. I'd love to get your perspective on that as a barrier to the growth of the industry, because I guess that's what we try and solve. I won't call out who.
Yeah, hi, this is Johara from DV. So yeah, hi. So definitely, I mean, thank you guys for putting this together. Obviously, I was on one of the group for barriers and driver. So definitely, this is what kind of like we reflected is there is a big education piece to be done when it comes to programmatic and how to tackle all of the brand suitability and fraud. So yeah, so there is a lot of work that's been done. There's a lot of education piece that we're driving in market. And as most of you know in the call, we've been seeing you for most of you. So definitely, I mean, watch the space because there's a lot of information coming in. If there is any specific question, let me know. I'm happy to respond.
Thanks, Johara. Do we have anybody who represents CTV, audio, digital out of home on the call? I can't see all the names because I'd be interested to hear your perspective on, we talked a little bit about that coming off a small base, the growth. Albert's just mentioned it as well. Interesting to get a perspective on that. Not.
Not, then I can just read out the point that I just mentioned. It's a topic for later, not related to the study that we just did, but then attention has picked up pretty significantly, not only in this market, but globally. And I know players like companies like BV are already sharing their POV, and like there are a few efforts done around it. Just wanted to know, if not now, maybe later, if IAB is planning to share a point of view on attention, and are we looking at attention becoming a calculated metric in future, similar to how viewability is today?
Exactly, Alfred. So this is, I mean, I'm going to jump in, Ian, on this. Sure. So yeah, definitely there is conversations we're having with the IAB measurements, and attention is definitely a new currency that we're looking into. So again, we obviously starting to share in markets information about what is attention, and essentially it's a new proprietary data solution that is going beyond viewability, right? So instead of only looking at viewability of views or clicks, this goes beyond understanding the index that, you know, any user is engaging, you know, with the ads, and that contains, you know, exposure and engagement. So definitely, again, watch the space on this because there's going to be a lot of information going through, and working in collaboration with the IAB, just to kind of like give a bit more understanding of getting that definition, I would say more in the market level. So yeah, definitely attention is one of the upcoming metrics, I would say, when it comes to, you know, measurements.
Perfect. Thanks for answering that question, Johara. I'm looking forward to having this. I know it might take some time, but then yeah, it would be really interesting to see how we calculate this.
It's actually ready. I think it's to understand if the market is ready to start using it. It's actually available.
Nice, perfect. Yeah, and then I think from there we should actually wait and see how platforms adopt it, because one thing is to start calculating this, and then I think the next step is to see how platforms incorporate this as a metric for maybe optimization and measurement on the platforms as well.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, feel free to get in touch with one of us at DV, and more than happy to give you more info. But for when it comes to with the IAB again, I think it was Ian, we're going to start, kind of like putting together all of the materials that needed for, this region specifically.
Yeah, so just to clarify, the IAB has a number of working committees, one of which is a measurement subcommittee, and they've identified 3 core topics that they would like to focus on. The one is around digital video measurement, particularly as it relates to KSA. The second one is around attribution, which we talked about earlier, and the third one is actually around attention. There's 1 or 2 others that they're looking at as well, but those are the 3 that have come through pretty clearly in most of the sort of round tables that we've had on this topic. So it's definitely on the agenda. Does anybody else have any other comments, thoughts, questions that they want to raise while we have the whole community together?
Hello, my name is Kamal. I'd like to ask a question regarding the overall competition within the DSPs. Obviously, it's well known that DV360's main competitive moats are their YouTube inventory, as well as their ability to stitch the user journey across devices. Do you believe that there's going to be a bifurcation in the DSP market, whereby players such as DV360, Amazon, maybe Criteo and Trade Desk will be more focused on the performance side, while the rest try to focus more on the brand side? Is this maybe pushing the conversation towards creating new metrics that would support that narrative? You mentioned already attention, or maybe something along the lines of, because one of the key factors was looking at contextual, maybe percentage of impressions matching contextual targets.
I don't know if anyone else wants to take this question. I mean, I don't think we have a specific opinion on that based on insights that we collected from the market. It's a fair question. I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on that. Anyone from the working groups was looking at this? No? Sorry, Kamal, but it is a good question, but I don't think we got enough insights.
Kamal, can you repeat please your question? Maybe either one of us, or even from the working groups, or from anyone else can maybe share opinion. Can you repeat again?
Sure. I'll simplify it. Basically, do you believe that with DV360 and Amazon and Trade Desk and Criteo, with these focusing more on their performance chops, do you believe that the rest of the DSPs are going to focus more on the brand side, in terms of it's not going to be able to measure, especially with privacy restrictions and maybe not having the same platforms that these other DSPs have? Amazon has Amazon, DV360 has YouTube, Google, etc. Unless the other DSPs are going to band up and buy publishers, it's not going to have the same scale in terms of access to first-party data. So do you believe that there's going to be more focus for those other DSPs?
Yeah, so Kamal, I think it's opinion sharing, because it's not covered by the field of the study. Maybe I don't want to throw you, but Jocelyn, I see you have an opinion on that, on the distinctive proposition for DSP, because you work with them. So I suppose you're best placed maybe to share your thoughts.
So I'm thinking perhaps it's not necessarily a black and white vision of performance versus brand, but there's a second way. Is if you look at, and there was a slide on this, basically the new formats that are coming out, DOH versus audio versus etc. So maybe some of the independent DSPs will specialize into these new formats which agreed is going to be brand, and not necessarily brand actually, because I'm also thinking that, you know, DOH and audio can be meeting performance goals as well. But maybe there's an element in there where the future of certain DSP specialization will rest in the formats themselves and not necessarily in performance versus brand. If that makes any sense. I know it's not necessarily the exact answer to the question, but maybe it's an avenue to explore. Does that make sense?
Sure. I think the challenge is going to be convincing clients that this performs better, because their visibility is going to be, as everyone here knows, it's going to be restricted to Google Analytics or a visit to the website metric, which isn't always going to be, you know, especially all these cool formats, you know, CTV and so on, audio, programmatic. These don't really support that end result of a click or visit to the website. So it's going to be difficult to tie that performance back to these kind of formats, and these probably formats are going to be more focused on by the DSPs that don't have a strong, let's say, moat on in the competitive space of performance DSPs.
Absolutely. So I think we've already got this today where, and actually that's really interesting because we had this conversation literally a few days ago with the team here presenting, where if you consider maybe Facebook and the other social platforms as DSPs in their own rights, not programmatic, but DSPs in their own rights, they don't necessarily play very well either with the Google Analytics, for example, or these kind of attribution platforms necessarily. So we're still finding workarounds, right? So it's ad tech, not everything kind of like breaks into each other like a Lego nice and easy, but it's about the value that you're attributing to these platforms because you believe they work, even if you look at the numbers, they don't necessarily work as good as the others, but you know that in fine, you still are getting good results. So I think it's going to be about the usual testing, seeing what's working here. You know, maybe Amazon DSP is going to work better for one specific product than another DSP, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really about trying new things and then seeing what DSP worked better for that specific format / product / whatever comes after this, really.
And add to this as well.
I just want to add to this. Thanks, Ash is rolling. Hi. This, I think, Kamal, that question, I kind of would wonder where that was coming from, because I think if we had a DSP play on this call, I mean, Ash, because you guys have the power of your Amazon data as a DSP, so I guess maybe that question is not really relevant for you. But if I think about all the other DSP players in the market or globally, I think they'll be horrified to hear that we're thinking about them as either branding or performance, because I could also argue that what do you consider branding, what do you consider performance campaigns, and what your metrics are tied to performance or branding campaign. Listen, the main things when it comes to choosing a DSP is the supply, is the data that it has, is the algorithm that allows it to like perform better, and it's probably its API connection that allows it, you know, for you to connect to that server or another measurement platform, a DMP or whatever. So that's the 4 key metrics, you know, you look at when you're looking at a DSP. The deprecation of cookies does not mean that one platform will suddenly decide that they're going to be experts at branding, because there are different ways to look at reaching the right user. It's not just about cookies. So this conversation is involved. I think for the IAB, I want to understand, you know, if we bring out a study to do with what happens after the deprecation of cookies, you know, what is the strength of a DSP or within programmatic space after the deprecation of cookies. But just to think about DSPs as either branding or performance, it's not fair to any DSP. You know, there's a lot of work in the back end when it comes to data. There's a lot of work going on with the Trade Desk and UID and other publishers and tech providers who have signed on to UID as well. So I just, sorry, someone saying something, sorry. So I just want to just clarify that I don't think any DSP should be looked at solely as either a branding or a performance platform, because they can do all of that. I think you look at DSP selection, down to the campaign brief, for example, down to if you look at tech, if you analyze the tech that your partner uses, maturity framework, so many factors to consider when selecting either a single DSP or multiple DSPs on our plan. But please, guys, in my opinion, I don't think it's right to then segment that into performance or purely branding and DSP. I don't think the market or DSPs are headed in that direction at all.
And just, I think to just second you here, Rolia, most players now in the market would want to be kind of across funnel, because this is also where they can show their full potential, by really showing how they can have an impact on awareness as well as driving results across performance. And also, I wanted to just point out that what will happen in the next couple of years is very unknown to all of us, because we've been doing and managing programmatic in a certain way, but now with the new limitations, with the cookie deprecations, etc., that are coming up, there will need to be a huge education piece on how to look at performance with the limitation that we have at hand, as well as with the new solutions that are coming up. And I think DSPs also have a very strong interest into having strategic integrations. They can obviously rely on their native solutions that they own, if they own any, but also how to integrate with the different new solutions that are coming up to really to be able to answer any analysis that is coming from the client. So if the client wants to look at performance from a very specific way, they have an integration that can help them showcase the value with that specific lens. So I think the power of a DSP is everything that Shirley just mentioned, but also their ability to be agile and flexible and have different integrations that can help enable the assessment of performance across their DSP. Hope this answers your question, Kamal.
I'm not sure if it's a straight answer or a straight question, to be honest. It's probably more of a debate issue.
For sure.
But thanks everyone for the inputs.
Great. Well, yeah, and I would echo that. Thanks to everyone for firstly making yourselves available. Thanks to everyone who helped pull together the survey. Thanks to everyone else who completed the survey, and thanks to everyone who's had this conversation about these important topics today. The presentation itself will be available to everybody on the IAB website, IAB GCC website from tomorrow. So keep an eye open for that, and you're more than welcome to use it as it stands. We'll be doing more of these kind of initiatives over the course of indefinitely, let's say. We will continue to do these initiatives. Any feedback you have, please feel free to send it through to us so we can take that into consideration. I think just listening to some of this conversation, it's clear that these kind of initiatives do at least bring the community together to talk about and to share important topics, which seem to help everybody. So if that's not the case, let us know. If it is the case, we'll certainly do more of them. So again, thanks very much. Thanks to our speakers who represented the working groups. So thanks for representing their work so well as well. And with that, I'll leave you to it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Thank you so much, guys. Bye-bye.